Uploading.
You, by definition, are part of our charter. Our mission is to seek out new and different life forms, and you certainly qualify as one of the most unique I've ever encountered.
One of the most enigmatic figures that exists in the Trek universe is that of John Delancey's Q. The Q, as a civilization, are highly sophisticated, extremely powerful beings that possess powers that appear to be near godlike. One of the few temporal hegemonies in the galaxy, the Q's intention are often shrouded in mystery, and it often appears like individual Q run rampant through the galaxy, without any consequence. Though I challenge this belief. We'll get into that later, of course. The main question of this essay is simply, are the Q villains, are they heroes, or are they something in the middle? Let's just get into it.
Or maybe it's my limited mind. But to become a part of you, I don't even like you.
Unfortunately, the only interactions we observe with the Q are generally from the point of view of Starfleet officers and Federation citizens, which is a very skewed image. It is somewhat akin to a soldier from the 1800s meeting a United States soldier in 2022. Or to give another analogy, from the standpoint of an ant, humans are gods. But we'll do what we can to try to understand the Q and their intentions in this breakdown.
Something strange on this detector circuit.
The USS Enterprise, no bloody A, B, C, but an actual D, is on its way to Farpoint Station. Ironically, this is the farthest point that the Federation has been, so it being called Farpoint Station is apt. They're on their way to the station to seek out new life and new civilizations. While on the way, they encounter a barrier that apparently prevents them from passing, and it would be at this critical juncture that Q makes himself known.
He would not have injured you. Do you recognize this? The stun setting?
Knowing humans as thou dost, Captain, wouldst thou be captured helpless by them?
It's intriguing to watch the back and forth between Captain Jean-Luc Picard and the godlike being, because honestly, they're both right. Q states that the history of humanity is barbaric, and to be caught by them is not ideal. We will see in future episodes, such as the Drumhead and the Measure of a Man, that Starfleet, and indeed humanity specifically, still have these problems. They still have to deal with bigotry. That said, Picard's military bashing aside, humanity has grown. Yes, they still have vestiges of whom they were, even if our boy doesn't admit it, but they are still better than what they were. They are more than the sum of their parts at this point. Ultimately, Q puts Picard and his crew on trial and threatens humanity overall, if not the Federation. Everyone is going to be forced to go back to their own planets, and no space travel will be allowed. Picard counters that Q should judge the Federation, and humanity, for who they are now. Ironically, Q takes him up on it. Their first test would, funny enough, be rather tame. When they decide not to leap before they look, they pass. This results in a life form that had formerly been enslaved being freed. But this was only the beginning. Q would warn them in the future that the Federation now had a powerful entity that could destroy them, consistently watching their every move. That the trial never ends. It's inferred that they better shape up or bad things would happen. Which, again, makes you think. Let's look further.
The joke is you.
Strange gratitude from one who has been granted a gift beyond any human dream.
In my opinion, Q's plans are much clearer the next time we observe him, which is in Hide and Q. Here, the entity known as Q states that after the initial test, the Continuum took an interest in them. Though I do wonder if Q is embellishing here, and we'll get into why later. The main thrust of this episode is Q admits to both Picard and Riker that humanity is evolving rapidly. He even states that they could be more powerful than the Continuum one day.
Have you any idea how far we'll advance?
Perhaps in a future that you cannot yet conceive, even beyond us.
If that's so, I don't know why this future humanity isn't stopping Q from messing with them, defending their own history, but we'll ignore that for the time being. What's important is that Riker is transformed into a Q and thus tested. This episode is always fun to watch because Riker has a lot of issues with the unlimited power that is given to him. And if you watch, while Q may seem like the bad guy here, that he's trying to tempt him to become something he's not, Q actually shows a lot of restraint as well. Oh sure, he does push him, but just a little. There are a lot of ways that Q could have been manipulative with Riker, but he's not. Honestly, again, I think this was simply a test, and that he didn't want to go too far. He just wanted to see if Riker was worthy, if humans were ultimately worthy of the power that one day would befall them. Riker does pass the test after being reminded by his friends that humanity is showing restraint and not having everything instantly, that they have to earn it. This, I think, was extremely impressive to Q and the Continuum. It taught the entities of unlimited power that humanity could handle what was thrown at them, what they would achieve. And so now we know that humanity doesn't look before it leaps. We know that humanity will wait for the power until they're ready for it. So the next time we see Q is in Q Who, which is a crazy episode.
We'll just have to see how ready you are.
If there ever was a scenario that highlighted Q as a possible villain, it would be this one. This is when the demigod throws the Enterprise D into a dangerous arena and people get killed. However, if we're all being honest with ourselves, Q was right to do so. Humanity, and much of Starfleet, were childlike. They were acting like they had no issues, that everything was going great. They had life on a string, they were invincible, nothing could touch them.
But I do know that we are ready to encounter it.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. That's why we're out here.
We'll just have to do the best we can without you.
What justifies that smugness?
Not smugness, not arrogance. But we're resolute, we're determined. And your help is not required.
And yet, they were wrong. We know that the Borg were already doing incursions into the Alpha and Beta quadrants at this point. They just didn't know about it. And it would only be a few short years when the Dominion War occurs. The Federation was unprepared, and if they kept on the course they were going, they would all be destroyed. However, Q showed Picard that there was more to do. When Picard begged to have his people brought back to life, the ones that had been killed, Q told him that that's not how it works. You go out into the universe, and people will die. That is just the way of it. Hell, this whole situation reminds me of when a parent tells a child not to touch a stove, and the child does touch the stove, and they get burned. That's just the way it works. Q did try to warn them, they didn't listen, so he let them learn on their own. There just was no way around it. And when you look at this in sequence, it continues on with the trial, with the tests. We see that humanity doesn't leap before it looks. We see that they are prepared to wait for the power. And now we've taught them that there are people and things out there that will destroy them if they do not prepare. Which leads us into Deja Q.
I stand before you defrocked, condemned to be a member of this lowest of species, a normal, imperfect, lumpen human being.
This is a different kind of episode, but one I question if everything is as it seems. Q is apparently thrown out of the Continuum and chooses to become a human. Through all of his trials and tribulations, he is attacked, maligned, and overall just not liked. But when a hostile species comes to kill him for all he has done, the humans protect him. He admits that he knew that they would be there if he were made mortal, but I wonder if there wasn't a plan all along.
But I find these humans rather interesting. I'm beginning to understand what you see in them. After all the things that you've done, they're still intent on keeping you safe.
At the end of the episode, we see that Q is visited by another Q. This other Q says that because of what John Delancey's Q has done, he now has taken a keen interest in humanity, that he sees what the other godlike being now sees in them. And there's the rub. All of this was played off by John Delancey's Q as if he finally learned self-sacrifice. But did he really learn it, or was he manipulating events in the Continuum so that they would actually look at humanity as it deserves to be looked at? Worthy of being spared, worthy of the Continuum focusing on them. Maybe this was all just John Delancey's Q being punished and learning to be a good person. Or maybe Q was looking out for a race that he thought was worthy. You guys decide on that one. Now, I will admit, Cupid is one episode where Q is being an idiot and just jealous, or maybe we could say he was testing the bounds of love or something. It adds very little value. It doesn't take anything away from this theory, but even mentors make mistakes, so let's just ignore that one and look at Tapestries. Both the episode's Tapestries and All Good Things are the culmination of everything that we've seen before. In Tapestries, once again, Q is showing Picard what would occur if he didn't take chances. If he wasn't willing to get hurt. He had to do better, had to strive to be more. If he didn't, then it would be mediocrity. This knowledge that Picard had received would be imparted to his crew, and specifically to Will Riker, who would become integral in future affairs of the Federation. I don't have a lot to add to this episode, but just to say that Picard was challenged and was shown what life is, and why sometimes the road not traveled isn't the best.
For what?
You had a hand in helping me get out of this.
I was the one that got you into it. A directive from the Continuum. The part about the helping hand, though, was my idea.
Now let's look at All Good Things. In All Good Things, Picard is placed in a position where the entire race of humanity potentially won't exist. He finds himself shifting between 3 distinct points in time and isn't aware of what's going on. Slowly, Q pushes him, gives him hints here and there, but he has to figure it out on his own. Ultimately, all these trials and tribulations forces Picard into a place that he had never been before. Q forces him to become something that he had never been. For one moment, Picard was as powerful as Q. His mind was open to possibilities he could not fathom. He was godlike. And this is the crux. Now, there are future episodes with Q in DS9, TNG, and Picard, and though I'm weary about where they are going in Picard, the future episodes are more focused on the Continuum than humanity, so they don't directly counter what I'm talking about today, but they don't add to it a lot either. In The Next Generation, Q may have not always done things in a way that seemed appropriate. He may have even come off as insidious, but he was teaching humanity. He was watching them. He was making sure that they were ready and almost safe. Now, the way that he did this often came with a body count, but that doesn't mean he wasn't ultimately trying to help, that he wasn't a mentor or a guide. Every episode, again with the exception of one possibly, pushes that humanity was going to become like the Q. And Q, while he was there, made sure they were on the right path. At least, this is how it looks to me. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.